Hey, what's up guys, my name is Cherno and welcome to another Sparky engine devlog. It has been a really long time since the last one, I'm sure I don't need to say that, but I've done some work since then. I haven't been working on Sparky too much, I haven't had that much time, but the stuff that I did do recently, I just wanted to share with you guys, hence the devlog. So, I mean, if we look at the commits here, the stuff that I'm really going to focus on is basically since kind of 8 days ago, because before that it was like a month, I think, without any work really. So there's two kind of things that I'm working on right now, and also in this devlog we're going to cover at the end what's going to happen in the next few weeks, in the next few months, because I do have a solid plan. But basically I've been working on, well, I mean, two big things have happened. The actually big one, I would say, is Physics 2D, right? So there's a Physics 2D branch, and this is basically incorporating Box 2D. I'm sure you could look at the commands, for example. This is incorporating Box 2D to essentially, like, there's a physics component now, a Physics 2D component. Here it is. Right, and you can see this is using kind of Box 2D to basically do some stuff. It's very much work in progress. I wouldn't, like, it's not even in master yet at all. None of the Physics 2D kind of stuff is. But yeah, I mean, I've been kind of working on that. It's been pretty easy to implement, to be honest. I mean, Box 2D is a really nice library that seems to do everything correctly. The thing is, I've been having some performance issues which I need to work out, but also the biggest thing that was interesting about Box 2D, and well, I mean, it was inevitable anyway, because as soon as you start kind of working on physics, you start having to, I guess, reflect on your maths library, right? And the fact is, like, in Sparky, we had a very loose definition of what rectangles were and what AABBs were. So for example, rectangles in Sparky used to be kind of a bottom left kind of, they used to essentially be a point plus width and height. So you would have like a point somewhere in like the bottom left corner of like a rectangle, and that would be a coordinate being stored there. That's what the rectangle coordinate was, the position of the rectangle. And then you had like a width and height, right? But Box 2D kind of deals with a center point and then half width and half height extents, right? So after some thinking, I decided to go with that as well. So we'll kind of look at those changes kind of from beginning to end, I guess. I don't know if I covered this stuff. I don't think it's too required. I don't remember. I mean, just loosely touching on that stuff. Scene 2D was kind of new. I don't know if that was in the last devlog. Probably not, though. And essentially what I'm doing kind of right now with Box 2D, obviously, is I'm trying to get the engine to a more or less kind of solid position as far as 2D goes, because I've obviously been focusing, like, most of the year was kind of spent on, and last year I guess as well, was spent on 3D stuff and like physically based rendering and, you know, getting a proper 3D renderer. But I kind of took a break from that now, and I'm doing some 2D stuff. Okay, cool. So anyway, enough talking. Let's look at what I've actually done. So, fixed font atlases never being marked clean after being updated. This was a huge change, as in it was only 3 lines, or well, like 1 real line. But basically, when I started doing the Box 2D stuff, I noticed that my performance was absolutely terrible. Like, I was rendering like maybe 10 or so sprites, and they were all being batched together, obviously, and that was taking, like, it was only running at like 150 FPS, and I was like, well, something has to be wrong. Like, something has to be very wrong, because that's absolutely ridiculous performance, ridiculously low. So I just literally just used Visual Studio's profiling tools to figure out what on earth was taking so long, and I realized this update atlas thing in font was taking up about 80% of the time. And so it turns out that like, what I did was there's this thing called dirty in the free type atlas, and I'm pretty sure I actually added that. I don't think that's standard free type or standard free type GL or anything, but I added that to basically make sure that we could update our atlases. Yeah, that would have been me. And it's an int for some reason. Okay, anyway, whatever. So if it is dirty, I didn't even realize it was an int. And I'm setting the int to false, which is fun. But anyway, the point is, that's probably going to be a compiler warning. But basically what we have here is, we didn't have this line. And so the performance before I added this line, and this is in release mode, by the way, But the performance was very, very bad. Let's see if we can... Yeah, I mean, like this, right, which is not really that much stuff going on here at all, was running at about 150 FPS, about 5 to 6 milliseconds in the rendering, right? Adding this line takes our 5 to 6 milliseconds, 150 FPS, all the way up to 0.4 milliseconds and about 1200 FPS when I'm recording. So there you go. Right, very easy change, and it, as you can see, increased our performance by a lot. So the issue that was happening there, obviously, is that when extra characters or when new characters were being used that hadn't yet been used in the font, right? So the way that fonts work roughly is essentially you have a font, like a texture atlas, right, or a sprite sheet that contains all of your glyphs that make up, you know, your font. So basically using your font, when you decide to draw a string, it'll go through each character. If the glyph doesn't already exist, and by glyph it literally just means character, right? If the glyph doesn't exist inside the texture, it will add the glyph to the texture, right, using the font. And that's all good, but obviously you have to have some kind of cache there, like as in, if the glyph is already in the texture, you don't need to update the texture. But what was happening here is that obviously this code didn't realize that it was done updating. So every time, like this dirty was always true. So update atlas would always, you can see every time the texture was requested, it would update the atlas, which would mean it would actually, you know, set the data of the texture. And of course, what that does say for DirectX is it actually, like, you know, opens up it actually maps the texture, which is very slow. So we don't want to do that anymore, and we're not anymore, thanks to this line. But basically, that solves a bunch of performance issues that I had with Sparky that I was like, what's actually going on here? Because it's so slow. Okay, the initial 2D work, this was just, I think, an auto-generated, yeah, this was basically the merge that I did. This doesn't actually include any 2D physics stuff. This commit message was written automatically by, that shouldn't be in there. But anyway, the commit message was written automatically by git merging. Okay, the other big thing that I did though, or I guess, I mean, one of the things that I did that's kind of big is, we now have a time step, right? And that was required for Box2D and stuff. So essentially a time step is just a little a struct that we have here that essentially just gives us, it doesn't even have an implementation file. It just gives us the time step, right, since the last frame, essentially. And also, I believe, yeah, okay, so it won't give you time since the beginning or anything, but it will give you the time since the last frame, right? So because of that, the way that you can use it is it gets passed to onUpdate, right? So every onUpdate method, so say in like test2D or something, has that time step, right? So we can easily see, for example, what our elapsed, get milliseconds, what our milliseconds were since the last frame, right? So it should be like, well, yeah, 0.8-ish, right? The thing is though, this will be like actually based on this rather than vsync or anything. So you can see it's kind of the same as that, right? It should probably be more or less stuck at about 16 because it should be running at like 60 FPS. But we'll investigate that, of course, when it comes up to it. In fact, that should be running at about 60. I wonder why. I guess this method's getting hit more often. Huh. Interesting. Anyway, yeah, okay, I know why that's happening. Still needs a little bit of work, but that stuff was needed for Box2D, which is why I added it. The other big stuff is the debug, the debug menu now supports directories, okay? This took me a little bit of time to implement, a few hours, it's quite a big job. But basically what you can do now with your debug menu is, say in like test2D or something, I think I've actually, yeah, what you can essentially do is when you add something to the debug menu, you can specify like a directory. So like, for example, you know, if you were doing, you know, I don't know, renderer stuff, another folder, my variable, right? And if we just do I don't know, new float. I don't really care. But basically you can put stuff with slashes in, and what will happen is you'll see that there is now a folder or a directory called renderer stuff, right? And in there's another folder, and then here's your variable which you can adjust, right? So that's the way that works. And then the back button currently is just this like extra kind of button up top. I might change the UI around, just haven't been bothered too much. But you can see stuff like the 2D renderer lets you like turn on post effects and masks and stuff all in here as well. And then the debug menu, like, you know, you can adjust like horizontal padding and stuff like that. Vertical padding, well, that's, reduce that, and then like font size and stuff. So that's quite fun. Yeah, that should have actually aligned that. Anyway, the point is, there we have that stuff. But yeah, the directories is really useful because obviously we can actually group stuff that belongs in directories now. I believe test3d as well actually has a, let's see, test3d will actually have like its own folder, because test3d like has a lot of stuff anyway. I can't even talk today. But sorry, I'm very tired. So if this is a bit incoherent, then I apologize. So you can see there's like a little macro that will essentially add everything to the debug menu under this test3d directory. So for example, this stuff, so cube, light, intensity, all that stuff will just be over here in under test3d, right? And then you can adjust the stuff there. So it's really nice because it groups stuff together, and you can see it's really easy to use API wise. You just specify like a path with slashes. So for example, you can see the renderer 2D does that. I don't even remember how I made it work for this, but I guess it's just in here, right? The only problem is that some of these need to be global, because for example we have, yeah, so for example here you can see we've just got renderer 2D slash blah blah blah. Some of these need to be static as well, because like there's a bunch of different batch 2D render, like batch renderer 2Ds, right? There's one for each layer, which is a bit annoying. I actually might get rid of that. There might just be one for all. But it's also quite nice having separate renderers because they can carry their own states and stuff like that. But maybe it might be worth just taking out the states. And anyway, there's a lot of stuff that we can discuss there, but I'm not going to bore you guys too much. So that's the directory stuff. Text alignment as well. So you'll see that labels now have an alignment set of options, left, center, or right, which is really nice because what we actually had before was, and I'll just look at the diff so I can show you guys, but what we had before is in like the in the, what am I looking for? In the debug layer, we used to have all this code here on tick that manually updated the position. So you can see that when, like for example, the FPS changed, because we wanted it to be right aligned, what it actually did was when the text was set, we got the position from the FPS label, and then we updated it by getting the bounding box of the text and then setting the position again. And it was just it was really annoying because again, if you wanted to have something aligned to the right side of the screen, you had to have this logic for every label. So you can see it's also for the memory usage label and for the frame time label. The labels I'm actually talking about are the ones on the right hand side here. So these ones here, like the milliseconds, the FPS, and the memory usage. So then now all you have to do is, well, you don't do that. You basically, when you create the label, you specify it to be right aligned, right, using this this optional parameter here. And then all you have to do is just do that one set text. You can see that that's all I'm doing, and that's it. And because it's right aligned, it will know that it's supposed to align it to the right hand side. And the way that works internally is also pretty simple. Like anytime you change the text or the alignment, the bounds will be updated, which means that it'll essentially just get the size of the text now, and then specify a certain alignment offset. So it's either going to be size X or negative size X essentially. And then when it actually says to draw the string, it just uses that alignment offset. It's really easy. It's really fast as well. And it works really well. Okay. And because of that, I also, like, because of the whole alignment thing and stuff, I decided to also clear up the kind of the padding. Oh, that's not good. I just realized that's a bit annoying. So my button is just hard-coded to be using the debug menu and stuff. Okay, that's interesting. I need to change that around. But basically, and it used to do that anyway to an extent, I guess. So these bounds probably just need to be specified better. But anyway, the point is we like the debug menu and everything. I don't know why I closed that, but the debug menu and everything should now look kind of prettier because it should, like the text will be like centered vertically and everything. And it's also a bit thinner so that you can really, it needs to be even lower. Otherwise, whoa. What happened there? We went way too far or something, I don't know. But anyway, that's very fast. Bring us down. So yeah, okay, cool. Anyway, enough about that. I think that's about it. So yeah, so pretty good changes, pretty solid changes, just polishing up the engine a little bit. Again, that optimization was huge. Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's talk about what's next. There's also custom actions to the debug menu now. So what you can do with the debug menu now is, let's just say I'm in Sandbox or like Test 3D. Let's go back to Test 2D. It's a bit quicker to load. Let's just say I'm in here. What you can actually do, and I literally added that today, was you can just basically say debug menu, add test, for example, and then what you can do is you can pass in a lambda, which does something. So for example, in this case, it'll just print out the word test, right? And then if I run that, and not forget that semicolon, if I run that, what you'll see is essentially in the debug menu, there's now a button called test, and when I click it, it will print test, right? So really simple stuff. Yeah, just a way to basically have that running there. The reason that's so good as well is because you can do stuff like load levels with that now, right? If you had like a level or a different scene that you wanted to load or a different layer or something, you can just, you know, put your loading, like you can basically kick off your loading code from inside this lambda essentially, and that's it. So it's really simple to use, and the back end of that is even simpler probably. I mean, if you look at debug menu action, there's now this thing called custom action, which just takes in a function, a void function, and then of course the on action is just to call that function, and that is it. Okay, cool. So yeah, the future. Let's talk a little bit about the future. One of the things that I'm still doing for university is essentially I have a set of research reports that I have to complete. And there's 2 of them. And what I've decided to do them, and they're kind of like a part A, part B, so they should be linked. And so what I've decided to do for them, and they're not like particularly like, they're not research reports as in like PhD research where it has to be like unique or something. It's just basically just to, you know, it's just a research project that basically just shows that I can do research. So the topic can be anything. And what I've decided to do is physically based rendering, which is why I've been spending quite a while on that earlier this year. And so what I've decided to do for part B as well, so part A will be kind of just physically based rendering and what it's like, how it compares to, you know, other BRDFs and stuff like Blinn-Phong and the previous kind of set of approaches versus physically based rendering on a modern kind of desktop platform, so like Windows, for example. That'll be kind of part A of the report, and then part B is going to be, what I've decided part B is going to be, is kind of the viability of PBR and where it's at on mobile, okay? So specifically iOS and maybe Android as well. And so what that's going to involve, since I've decided to do mobile, is porting Sparky, or rather adding mobile support to Sparky, okay? So Sparky will support iOS and, well, iOS and Android, but for now I'm gonna start kind of working on creating an iOS build, okay? So that's gonna be what I'm gonna be doing for the next kind of few weeks. I'm still kind of tidying up the engine here and there with stuff like this, just so that it's, you know, fairly stable and looks quite nice. But yeah, so in the next few weeks, I'm going to definitely start on that iOS build. Because of that, I've decided to do a Mac build first. It doesn't make that much sense to do a Mac build first, but I want to do a Mac build first anyway because I want the project in Xcode and I want the project I want to basically eliminate all the DirectX and OpenGL and Windows kind of dependencies, right? I want to make sure that they're all boxed up and only going to be compiling for Windows. And I also, on the other side, kind of want to make sure that this engine can be compiled with Clang, because right now I've only ever tested it on MSVC, of course, which is the Visual Studio compiler, and that's great. But obviously for iOS, I'm going to have to use Clang. For Android, I'm going to have to use Clang as well. So just making sure that it's all compatible with Clang. And of course, iOS kind of has Apple's version of Clang, which is a little bit different than the Clang that you'll find for Android. But anyway, the point is, I'm going to port it to Mac first. So hopefully I'll be done in like a week or so, and I'll keep you guys updated with that. I might even do some live streams. And then I'm going to, after the Mac build is fairly stable and everything, I'm going to port it to iOS, which will probably take 2 to 3 weeks. I'm not really sure how long it's going to take. It's going to require quite a bit of extra code and stuff, because mobile platforms in general are pretty intensive. Like, there's a lot of stuff that you really need to handle. So we'll see how that goes. But it should be pretty exciting. I'm going to definitely enjoy seeing Sparky on iOS. Sparky on Android was a thing almost a year ago. I did actually get it to run on Android with about a day's worth of work. And essentially, all that involved was basically creating a native application and then just, switching out a few of the windowing stuff. This was back when Sparky was a lot smaller and didn't have DirectX and OpenGL support. But it was pretty easy to implement, and so I basically know the work required to get this to work on Android. But iOS is going to be a different beast altogether, and I've never actually made an iOS app at all, so this is going to be exciting. I mean, certainly I've got experience working with iOS and stuff like that from work, but myself, I haven't actually done it personally for my projects, so that should be pretty exciting. That's basically what's going to happen over the next few weeks. The thing that I'm really not looking forward to is the renderer and like the rendering code. The reason is, right now we have two renderers, OpenGL and DirectX. The problem is that none of those are supported by mobile platforms, right? iOS supports GLES, right? OpenGL ES, which is completely different. And I mean, it's similar, obviously. Like, it's not as different as like DirectX, for example, but it is very different. Don't get me wrong. If you think that OpenGL ES and like if you think GLES and OpenGL are the same, then you're very much mistaken. And then of course Metal. So I would like to write a Metal renderer, but again, well, I don't know how long. That's going to take me a while, like a few weeks at least. So I don't know if that's worth kind of allocating time for that. And then on Android, of course, you have GLES as well, but then you also have Vulkan, which is kind of where it's heading nowadays. Now, there aren't many Vulkan devices though, right? Like iOS supports Vulkan, iOS supports Metal from, I think, the iPhone 5S onwards. So it's pretty like mature. Whereas Vulkan is only supported on a handful of Android devices. I actually don't even know if, like, I guess the S7, I think, the Galaxy S7, and then like NVIDIA Shield and stuff. I'm not even sure if, I guess Vulkan on Android is somewhat out in the real world nowadays. I'm not sure, because like I was using it at work before it came out. So I haven't stayed up to date with Vulkan since then. So I'm not really sure if it's actually out for the public. I guess it would be, like, I mean, on mobile platforms. I know it's like available for desktop and stuff. But I'd have to look into that. So the likely thing that's going to happen is a GLES renderer, just because that's supported by both platforms. And because I don't want to spend a while working on Metal, because as you know, to add another graphics API is not going to be as difficult as it was to add DirectX, because I had to like refactor the engine to support, either. But you can see how much code is in here, right? Like there's a fair few, like there's quite a bit of stuff, and particularly the shader stuff is the kind of the hard parts, right? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. All in all, I'm not particularly looking forward to this, because porting to a different platform, this isn't just about porting to a platform, it's about writing platform support for an engine, right? Which is going to be not so fun, and it's going to be a really long task, but that's what's going to happen, okay? And I have to do that now, not just for myself and because I want to, but because I have to do it for university. So yes, I will be spending more time on Sparky very soon. But yeah, anyway, I'm going to stop rambling. That is the way that the cookie crumbles. Okay, I haven't said that in a while. I will try and do some live streams if I end up like working on this stuff on a Saturday afternoon or something. But apart from that, I will definitely keep you guys updated with devlogs. And if you don't follow me on Twitter, you should. It's twitter.com/thecherno. I'll constantly tweet like progress updates and like, you know, code snippets and whatever. And make sure you're following me on Slack, or you are in my Slack team, right? So slack.thecherno.com, link will be in the description, of course, because Slack is a really nice place to talk about stuff. And of course, I will constantly be posting into the Sparky channel on that Slack, and you know, stuff like screenshots and whatever. So if you want to follow along with the development of that, then Twitter and Slack are the best places to do that. Okay, cool. Anyway, should be a pretty exciting next few months. So much work. I'm just thinking how much work that is, because that is a lot of work. I mean, if any of you guys want to help me out, then you are certainly more than welcome to, because obviously the actual work that I have to do is the research report. The actual implementation is just, that's not part of the report or anything. So yeah, cool. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.